CCRI is a really important institution around here. Sometimes it gets a ribbing. I don't think it should.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
All right, welcome in on this Thursday evening. We have the new president of CCRI in this evening, and I always look forward to talking to educators, and especially the high-level educators. You know, CCRI has a kind of a unique relationship with the community. It is often knocked and ridiculed by people, and I've never understood why. I mean, I understand why. I'm not duh. You know, there's a thing to junior and now community college, and you know, non-achievers and all sorts of I think, you know, completely inaccurate types of biases for schools like this. But I'll tell you, especially in the world of college education, I just got done paying tuition. It is a bridge to somewhere, and you know, we got to get smart about this, and obviously we got to improve the performance of that institution because, you know, we need taxpayers, right? Headline here, of course, it was interesting that the governor put up the free tuition idea, which I completely disagreed with, other than for CCRI. I see a distinction between what we do with CCRI and what we were doing with Rick and URI, and President Dooley from UNI had a good old-fashioned battle about that here, but reminding you as to what the governor had to say.
We were able to pass a budget which has, again, record investments in education, job training, economic development, increase the minimum wage, increases wages for home care workers, increases wages for those who care for the developmentally disabled, and makes us the 4th state in America to provide tuition-free community college for every high school graduate.
So you heard it, you know, almost ad nauseum, actually, in the budget session, where the governor was, you know, taking the stand on 2 years of no-charge college education. The original plan, welcome, doctor, nice to have you. The original plan was her original plan was to make junior and senior year, both Rick and URI, no charge on tuition. And you guys are always included on a 2-year basis at CCRI. I always thought that was a pretty good idea, because I've been empathetic to the CCRI model, because kids need to be able to get going, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, welcome in.
Thank you.
What was your, I know you came to that big press briefing with President Dooley, made the speech for this whole thing. Is this an organically important idea that you would have brainstormed yourself? Or is this something you just had to go along with because it's part of the governor's agenda?
So first of all, thanks for having me.
You bet.
And second, I love the frame you gave at the very opening, and I heard 2 things. The first is sort of what the historical sort of portrayal of the college has been, that you don't share that perception. And the second thing I heard you say was a bridge. And if I might, I'd like to just start there.
Sure, go ahead.
We're not a destination, right? Our college, and we will measure our success based on 2 things fundamentally. The first is, do our students come into this college? Do they get an outstanding education and the skills they need to cross our graduation stage and get an excellent first career or transfer into one of our 4-year colleges, especially into Rhode Island College and URI? That's how we are going to measure our success. You know, the second thing I would say about the promise more generally, this is a new idea nationally. It's certainly a very new idea in Rhode Island.
The promise being the free tuition.
Yes,
right, yeah.
Rhode Island Promise.
Right.
I think we've had a very healthy conversation statewide about what it should look like. To answer your question specifically, you know, this is that proposal came out of the governor's office, as the new legislation does, and as you well said, you know, the initial proposal did include URI and Rick. I think there can be a healthy conversation about what that looks like. If I were to step back, though, and locate myself in that initial conversation, you heard me say that I was strongly in support of the umbrella funding. And the reason for that goes back to my very beginning, which is when our students come into my door and I say to them, why are you here? You know what they say. They say 2 things. I'm here because I want a better life for my family, and I know I need to get a degree to do that, to get a really good job, and I want to go on to a 4-year school. So I think this is a great
or I can't afford a big time institution right now, or I screwed up in high school and I'm really behind and I need to kick it back in.
Oh, I love it.
Or.
No question. I mean, the ground upon which we walk is our students are the most financially vulnerable college students in the state of Rhode Island. That's a given, right? The vast majority of our students are low income. They're Pell eligible, which, as you know, means they're getting funded through federal financial aid, and the majority of them are first-generation students. So I go back to that opening frame, right? And you know, I've been in Rhode Island 20 years, but I wasn't here when the college was founded 50 years ago, when the sort of pejorative nickname was Reject.
Right.
That has never been my experience at our college. So I think that idea, that perception, I think, is shifting. And why is it shifting? If you look nationwide, you know, 50% of all American college students, they're community college students. So back in the day, right, I think it was considered an alternative. The language was around a non-traditional student. I think we can say that if half of if half of the college-going population is a community college student, we've become traditional. So, you know, we're thrilled with this opportunity. We know that we've enjoyed initial success in admitting an extraordinary number.
Well, what's the bump been?
So I'll give you just a couple of data points, right? Last year, we had 952 students that fit this cohort. And you know that the cohort is, you must have just graduated, right, from high school, and you must be enrolled full-time at the college, or you must have your GED. So that's, you know, just rough numbers. That's just under 10% of our population. You know that the majority of our students are part-time, the majority of our students are adult learners. So when we talk about free tuition, we're talking about funding that extends to, you know, less than 10% of our students. What we've seen in terms of bump, which is what you were asking, what I would share first is the program is largely modeled on the Tennessee Promise. You know, started and funded by the great Republican governor, Harlan. And Tennessee had a year to plan, additional marketing dollars to implement, and Tennessee in its first year saw a 25% bump. Rhode Island is scrappy. We didn't have a single additional marketing dollar, and as you know, because the budget was signed late, we had 4 weeks to plan and implement, and we saw a jump of 47%.
And that translates to how many students?
We're just north of 1,400. So, you know, I think if I were to anticipate where you might go is kind of, is the college feeling stretched? You know, are there enough room, are there enough seats in the classroom? And as I know you know, we were facing an enrollment decline, right? When the economy gets better, community college students go to work. Historically, that's what you'll see all over the country. And in addition to that, in Rhode Island, in terms of raw numbers of high school graduates, that raw number is going down. Right, so we were facing a decline, so we're absolutely thrilled, right? We get to open our doors wide and we get to fill our classrooms. So we're easily able to accommodate that, you know, that bump. It's a significant bump in terms of that cohort, but with respect to the 15,000 or so students that we serve, we can readily absorb them and are.
What is the metric by which you will be able to say, man, if we move the needle with this place, where people stop? Frankly, I don't hear a lot about it now. I mean, I think, it might be your experience as well, I don't hear a lot of ridicule of CCRI lately. It seems to have gone out of fashion. But what will be the metric where people say, man, is that place humming?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. You know, two things, that's where I started. I want to see our graduation rates significantly improve. So, you know, what I said when I came in a year and a half ago, we intend to make this the highest performing community college in New England. We're already the biggest. We intend to be the best. So I think fundamentally, taxpayers and our students should be looking at two metrics. The first is the graduation rate, and the second is that the employment. You know, we have significant work, I think, to do with building really meaningful relationships with our employers.
The truth is that this kind of collegiate education is not a big graduation thing across the country. I mean, like 1 out of 5 graduate on a 2-year schedule, right? So,
yes.
And we're less than 1 out of 5. We're at what, 17% versus your goal is 22%? Is that the number that we're talking about? Ish?
If I can jump to that, right? Yeah. The Rhode Island Promise cohort, we have a really aggressive goal of doubling our 2-year graduation rate. What I would offer very quickly is, I think that matters, right? I think Rhode Island needs many more qualified college graduates than we currently have. So we're going to be following that closely. But I think the metric that matters for the entire community college population is that 3-year rate. And here's why. If you're going to college part-time because you're working, which is virtually 100% of our part-time students, it is actually impossible to graduate in 2 years. So what I'm focused on is that, I'm focused on both, but in terms of hitting the biggest number of students outside of the promise, it's going to be that 3-year rate.
I see that as a non-starter if you want to argue it. What I didn't realize until I had a kid in college is that most of them don't graduate in 4 years on that program either. That the 5-year thing is because the academic rigor, believe it or not, for you old farts like me, is actually tougher these days. And so, and some of the pressures are a little bit different. So it seems to me that 2 or 3 years is not going to be a big difference when it comes to the populace evaluating. It's just a question of whether you know, better vibes are coming out of that place and more kids seem to be thriving and employed. I don't know whether you'll ever have a metric that people say, wow, CCRI is the best ever. But I think the collegiate education in Rhode Island, listen, we got our problems on all sorts of fronts, but in terms of value, URI and the institution that it is, RIC, which I think is an incredible 4-year investment, and CCRI, which is a boost, the ROI here is pretty good on a public education basis.
I would agree with that.
Right?
I would agree with that.
I mean, I didn't come in to cheerlead for you, but I've always felt that. And if it's the truth, according to me, I say it.
Well, right. That we know what the economic data looks like in Rhode Island. If you have an associate degree, your earnings go up 25% over a high school diploma. It's just that simple. And if you then go on to complete a bachelor's, it's 50% increase. So that, I think that that's what we talk to our students about. Right. I think you gave me the opportunity to speak to how will we measure our success. So graduation rate, that's a lagging indicator. I'm impatient. Our students deserve a tremendous amount of urgency, but let's be frank, it's going to take a couple of years to see a significant move on that needle. So what do I want people like you to be looking at? Once the students come through our door, are we doing a better job of keeping them?
All right, well, there's a bridge to the next conversation, because some faculty aren't happy with the new president. We'll talk about it next. CCRI, oh, by the way, not for nothing, this is really not in the wheelhouse of conversation, but somebody sent me a message that you redid the Warwick campus, and they're worried about like, disabled students being able to actually, in the weather, you know, if you've been to the campus, you drive inside, you know, it's weird, I don't know who built that thing, but it's really kind of a, I don't know who was, you know, some construction around here I wonder about. But given that there was at least some cover, you reorganized and rebarricaded the whole. What up with that?
Yep. So thank you for the opportunity to respond. And the first thing I would say is,
you've heard the complaints.
I absolutely have. We're working aggressively to solve them. It's a 2-phase project. What we've done right now with the first phase is actually to increase accessible parking by 50%. The second phase, we will double it. So what I have experienced personally, because that's the campus I come to most days, it's a new process, it's a new system of learning, and I think we are working aggressively to get the kind of signage that we know our students and
I guess some people
need.
with disabilities and like who had you know, handicap access feel like that, you know, they don't have the weather cover and all that kind of stuff because they used to be able to get out underneath the cover of the building the way it was set up.
Yep. So look,
FYI, that's I didn't bring you here, but no, people are upset about that.
Thank you. Have them call my office directly, and we will talk about it. Please.
Anyway, just the pictures that made me think about that. All right, so you've had a couple of no confidence bubbles up here. Some 50 faculty members indicated that they don't like the way it's going. They don't feel like they're included. This is. I'm not dismissing the complaints. I don't understand them all.
Sure.
I wanted to talk to you about it first. I think already anybody watching the show, and I'm learning that you're pretty take charge. I'm guessing you don't suffer fools, and you probably want to make a lot of decisions very quickly. I can tell why you probably blew through this interview process with an extraordinary resume, perhaps not one that traditionally matches up to a job like this, right? So I get that. What's going on?
Sure.
What's wrong?
Thank you for the question. You know, I'd say a couple of things. I've yet to meet a large number of people who welcome change. I think change is hard. It's change for all. It's hard for all of us. And when I came into the college a year and a half ago, it was very, very clear from the council, from the legislature, from Rhode Islanders, that change needed to take place at the college. And in fact, from inside the college, from many, many faculty members, from staff, from students, it was very clear that we needed to think about new ways of serving our students better. What I would offer is the following. There are hundreds of faculty members at that college who have given their careers. Those are the ones I see every day, working out of the light, just with passion and with attention to our students. I feel strong support from the faculty. What I would say is, from the minority group that you're talking about, I think that is the group that is struggling the most with what we are at the college to do.
Well, specifically, what is it? What is it do you think they're struggling with?
So,
give me something anecdotal so people can understand exactly what's going on.
Let's say we had 2 ways of delivering math at the college, and as you certainly know, in order to get a degree at the college, you need to pass a gateway math class. We had 2 ways of delivering: a standard lecture like you and I went through, in my case, a million years ago, and something that was called the Math Lab, which at the time that it was designed, several decades ago, was sort of the leading way of serving students in an alternative fashion. What we learned from data done by our institutional research analysts is that the students that were placed into the Math Lab performed significantly less well. So their chances of success were, by a significant percentage, poorer.
So that curriculum was not working?
Curriculum wasn't working.
And you did what?
We had the data. The chair of the department at that time worked in partnership with the academic affairs leadership to come to the math faculty and say, here's the data. This is what it's telling us. We really cannot continue to run a math program that is not serving our students. We want you to come together to look at best practices from around the country and, in concert with experts, design the new way to do it.
Seems to be perfectly reasonable. What happened? Why was it discontent?
I think you'd have to ask them. But I think you talked about drive, and I talked earlier about urgency. I think it's a really good example of what I think a leader needs to do, which is, when you have something in front of you that requires action, and that inaction will harm your students, you need to make sure that change takes place. So, that was a conversation that was taking place last spring. We have moved forward. I really am confident that most folks are coming on board. You referenced earlier this concept of no confidence, and the only thing I would specifically say to that is that was the student government who was of a single campus, the Nye campus, that issued that, and it was 30 days in to their administration. I have gone on to meet with them regularly. I spoke to the president last night on my way out. I think we are in a really positive place working with that student government, and I'm optimistic that'll continue to be true.
Are you nudging them to revisit their no confidence and to restate their position at some juncture?
Well, it's a good idea.
When we come, there you go. Always willing to help. Where we go next in the future with this school, stay with us. You can't talk about what's going forward without going back a little bit. You kind of, many might have thought you were an upset pick to be the CCRI president because of your, you had academic background, obviously, but you spent 6 years in this Year Up program, correct?
Yep, I did.
What is it?
So, in a single sentence, we would say we move urban young adults from poverty to professional careers in 1 year. So we're one of I still serve on the board, so I use the word we. It's a national workforce development and college prep program for low-income young adults.
How profound was it in Rhode Island?
Well, here's what I can say. We had sort of highest outcomes nationally. We became the model that other cities adopted.
How many kids involved?
In Rhode Island, we now have about 1,000 graduates, and we serve, a couple hundred a year.
So, look, if I'm on the interview process, and rather than just, by the way, the former president I thought was a terrific guy and did a lot.
Indeed.
Did a lot of good things.
Yes, he did.
And he goes way back to Springfield, Mass. with me, and I think he's a consummate educator, but veteran. And the models sometimes need a fresh look. You, I understand why the trustees and everybody else took a look. Because if you're figuring out how to transition kids, and CCRI is right in the middle of that model.
That's it.
Right?
That's it. So President DePasquale and I wrote the first dual enrollment contract in order to ensure that
you and your role at Yorke,
as I was the executive director.
Yeah,
no, Ray's a fantastic individual
awesome,
and a great leader, and he understood what the goal of that program was and what we share in common. I think here's what I think is helpful about Year Up as it relates to CCRI. I think it's a couple of things. One, the scale of the college now is the scale of what we were doing nationally, right? So I have the idea that you in fact can serve thousands of young people effectively and get them across the graduation stage and into a great job. It's what Year Up does better than anybody I've ever seen. I think what Year Up, I think, shows folks that you already knew, but not all Rhode Islanders know, is that our young people have enormous potential and possibility.
But also challenges. And many of the professors that I've met at CCRI have long told me, Dan, you won't believe how ill-prepared these kids come into our place.
Yep.
And so it seems to me, if you're running that joint, you ought to be really in the underwear of the secondary educational system all the way down. And by the way, I've learned as a parent that what happens in second and third and fourth grade manifests itself. I still have a college graduate, magna cum laude, who still has trouble with algebra, still has trouble with the I think the child abuse of innovations math, investigations math, whatever the hell it was years ago. All that incubation and playing around with kids' heads hurts, and they come into a place like CCRI wounded. Never mind the socioeconomic conditions. Right? So, right?
There's good news on this front, so I'm happy to report there's excellent news, and here's what I mean by that. I talk to Commissioner Wagner frequently about this topic, and my frame would simply be, I think blame sort of gets us nowhere, because our students come and they need to be served, right?
It is what it is.
That's it, and we have work to do. So the college is attacking it from 3 different angles. The first is...
Which you have a minute to address.
Oh boy. We're working with the high school so that when the students get to us, they're ready for college algebra. That's the first thing. And the second is, for those students who are already arriving at our doors and they're not ready for college level English or math, we have developed a model where they can take the developmental work with the credit bearing work in a single semester, and they're performing as well or better than their peers. So we're on the move, and you're going to see that. Come back and ask me how we're doing.
All right. So how long before you put your feet up and say to yourself, man, either we did it or we're doing it?
Oh, I'm never going to give up. We're doing it right now. There's already progress, and I meant what I said. We intend to be the best.
All right. Well, listen, there's a lot of nuances to this conversation, so come back often and come to the radio where we can take some questions from people, because I'll tell you, when you talk education around here, people pay attention. Yeah. You're not operating in a vacuum.
True.
Right?
Yes.
Paying attention. Good luck.
Thank you for having me.
Congratulations and
Appreciate
good luck.
it. Thank you.
All right, when we come back, we'll tell you what day is today? Thursday? We got a good show tomorrow. Stay with us. So President Trump, started quite the thing when it came to getting after the NFL, right? One of the lead thinkers in sports in our region is Bill Reynolds from the Providence Journal, and he will join us tomorrow night to kind of talk about the role of athletes, whether we ought to respect or not so much their points of view when they're articulated, at least symbolically, on the playing field. Race is a really important conversation in this, and he's got some really provocative things to say, and we'll pick his brain tomorrow night. Don't forget, 3 o'clock till 6 on WPRO. Thanks for watching. Have a great evening. Good night.